Welcome back to the waiting room with Dr. SEC. We're going to go back to the Net Talk hotline, and we're going to be joined by one of my favorite guests, David Murray from dogsbite.com. Welcome to the show, David.
Well, glad to be here today.
Good. It's been a while since we had you on. In fact, last time we had you on, it was right after spring practice, and we were talking about the potential that this Mississippi State team had. And I was very high on them going into coming out of spring, going into the fall. I thought they were a 10-win team. You were even higher on them. I had no idea this was coming, as good as I thought they were going to be. You must have seen something in the spring that just made you know this team was going to be special.
Well, a little bit of correction there. I don't think I ever predicted 10 wins because honestly I did not know what the rest of the SEC was shaping up as. So I was a little more cautious than that. I thought it definitely, judging the schedule, what I knew about various SEC West opponents, I knew the Bulldogs should cruise to their non-conference schedule. That was never much of an issue. But as things have played out, I think in most people's minds they have exceeded expectations. Now, you can look at it to say that some of the SEC opponents they played at the time and place maybe had their struggles, but I think what has happened as far as the West and, for that matter, the SEC as a whole, in its out-of-conference games was that one glaring exception of Missouri and Indiana, which still scratches a lot of heads out there. And of course, I know India has a quarterback injury since then. Other than that, you have to look at it and say the Bulldogs have shown the advantages you have in what is the most important thing, that is, a good defense and a veteran quarterback. They had those two elements, and that's what's allowed the Bulldogs this year to have put themselves in position now with 9 wins. And let's be clear, the first ever 9-0 start by a Mississippi State team in only 115 seasons to put themselves in positions to do even more historic things at this point, depending on what happens Saturday.
Absolutely. And, of course, when you talk Mississippi State, you can't talk about the Bulldogs and not talk about probably the front runner, if not one of the top 2 for the Heisman, Dak Prescott. The first time I ever met Dak was I covered the Kentucky-Mississippi State game on Thursday night the year before last year.
Right.
And very good game. But I remember waiting for him to come into the media room. He was the last guy to come in. And,
get used to that.
Yeah. But I remember him walking in the room, and he just had such a charisma about him and such a I didn't know how any other way to word it, but that kind of it factor that he has as a leader. You could just see it, a confidence oozing from him, even then when he was just really, beginning to develop as a quarterback. Have you seen that even grow more this year, that he's just an outstanding leader?
Absolutely. You mentioned the it factor. That's a phrase Coach Dan Mullen first used, believe it or not, the February he signed Dak Prescott. And now Dak was not a totally unknown prospect. Let's be clear. It's not like he came out of absolutely nowhere. He was, if you care about the star system, he was a 2/3 who, by the time his recruiting ended, it was starting to edge up in people's stock because they had a chance to look more at what he offered. But by no token was he somebody that, lit up the national radar as you got to sign this kid. Coach John Hevesy, actually, the line coach, was the first to truly identify him. He talked to his close friend and longtime coaching partner, Dan Mullen, and he went and took a look, and he identified that. And ever since then, Dak Prescott has more than lived up to what they expected. And what you mentioned about him, yes, his intangibles are what jump out at you first. He's a guy who simply, what's the phrase we use in athletic? He owns the room when he walks in. Everybody knows he's there, whether it's on the football field, in the classroom, anywhere on campus, around town. It's just something about him that attracts people to him, whether it's got to do with football or not. He has that, and it's pure character. It comes from his own upbringing, obviously. Great credit to his late mother, his grandmother, who is as much a factor in his life, and he has his brothers also. He has had all that going for him, but he's taken it and developed it on his own initiative. Dak Prescott has put so much more work into becoming an SEC quarterback, an SEC ball player, and just a all-around athlete than people ever give him credit for. And now it's paying off in this season where, as you mentioned, he's one of the consensus top 2 candidates at this point for the Heisman Trophy consideration.
Absolutely, and he's not at it alone. The guy that really, for me, you've probably seen this coming, I didn't, was Josh Robinson. My biggest thing going into this season was I wasn't sure if they had a running back that was that a SEC caliber style running back. This guy's more than just SEC caliber. He's put up numbers that should put him in national considerations as well.
He has, and we knew that Josh would be good this year, and the obvious question is why he did not get more snaps last season when Ladarius Perkins had an ankle issue. Well, part of it was Ladarius had proven his ability in the passing game, and if you'll remember, the 2013 team began as an extension of 2012, which is more built around the pocket passing, rollout passing abilities of Tyler Russell. As the season developed, and it's been proven now that probably they should have ridden with Robinson more, but as a result, a lot of people didn't know what to expect out of him on the other side of the ball, and that's played to his benefit. And plus, keep in mind his statistics, he's something like 16 yards short of 1,000 yards this season. Yeah. Had they left him in any of those first 3 games, instead of sharing the snaps with all those guys, he'd be at 1,200 yards right now and running away with all sorts of records. If you know Josh, that's probably a good thing he doesn't, because you got to keep the kid hungry. He's one of those guys that a couple times this season they had to put him in, what's the phrase for it, Twitter jail, because he tends to get a little voluble on social media, but that's just his personality. And he's the one who goes with I think the catchphrase now is Dakman and Robinson backfield combination they have. Dak is able to look at his teammate and just kind of shake his head, keep the emotions under control, and be the straight man in that combo. But you're not going to run into better at this point combination, the 1-2 punch. Auburn obviously has that in Cameron Artis-Payne and Nick Marshall, but Mississippi State is able to make it more productive more consistently so far this season. And that's the key, because they're going behind an interior line of just 4 blockers. State that rarely comes with a true blocking tight end in that regard. So they're getting that running production out of a spread-type offensive system.
Absolutely. And one of the guys I want to talk about now, kind of lead us into the Alabama game and maybe kind of get an update on him. And he's a guy that coming into the season that was leading all SEC returning receivers, but a guy that I feel like is used a lot like Percy Harvin was in the Florida system, just put him all over the place and do so many things with him. And, of course, talking about Jamion Lewis, what's the update on his health?
He is practicing this week. He's been practicing for a couple of weeks. He's been held out of contact, and he was allowed to play after he hurt the ankle. He hurt the leg in the LSU game, basically on his big touchdown play, a short catch turned into a long run, and really broke it open in the second half there, just when it looked like LSU might be trying to mount a comeback. He missed 2 entire games. He got in some snaps in the Kentucky game, and he tried to come back again in the Arkansas game, and it's to the point of how much pain can he play with that position. So against his wishes, they sat him out this past game. He really, truly wanted to play. They want to have him ready as possible, certainly for this week if he can. If he can't, they want him ready for those last 2 games. And because he's a senior, too, they want to give him the best shot possible for bowl season, for postseason play, to make his case to the scouts. So he's being tightly guarded in that aspect. However, his absence has allowed State to make a couple of moves. First, they came with Gabe Miles, the redshirt freshman, who is a quite competent slot receiver himself, and I think big things ahead for him. He's just great hands, great instincts, a lot of smarts, and maybe not the pure breakaway speed that Robinson has, but I think in time he'll be fine there. But what they've done more recently is they took split-in Fred Ross and moved him to the slot position where you see the results. He's the guy who had the 59-yard touchdown play against Arkansas, which broke the tie and proved to be the winning points in that game. He had several big catches against Kentucky as well. So what State has done is taken advantage of their wide receiver depth, shuffled some people around, stuck with their 4 wide set with Malcolm Johnson as your tight end, and basically another slot receiver if you want to look at it that way, and work guys like De'Runnya Wilson, who now defenses are so focused on, he's opened up the field for Fred Ross, Fred Brown, Joe Morrow, and, of course, Robert Johnson to make more catches. Everybody wants to know why De'Runnya Wilson's not involved in the passing game these days. Oh, he is. It's just that defenses are obsessing on him and leaving things open for other receivers. That's something State could not have done in recent seasons. They simply didn't have the talent, the experience, and the depth at the receiver position to do it. This year they do, and you see the results.
Absolutely. Once again, we're talking to David Murray with dogsbite.com. David, going into this game, I feel that Mississippi State is going to find some success with this offense. I think it's one of the most well-rounded offenses in the country. With that said, they got a tough task because Alabama on offense has been anemic on the road, scoring 1 touchdown against Ole Miss, 2 touchdowns against Arkansas, 1 touchdown in regulation against LSU. But at home, it's been a different story, and they're kind of in a quandary here because they haven't ran the ball all that well this season in comparison to times past. And we know the kind of season that Amari Cooper's having, but a lot of people feel like Alabama's going to want to really establish the run to try to keep Mississippi State off the field. What are you looking for? Because at the same time, I mean, the weakness of Mississippi State so far has been that secondary this season. What are you looking for when you go into this game, Alabama's offense versus Mississippi State's defense?
Yeah, I think you put the obvious factor out there first. Alabama, if you look at their results, it's not so much the road games, I think, as who are the most physical defenses they faced.
Yeah.
Well, you ran through them in order there, and including Florida as well. I think that has a lot to do with it. Now, their ground game is still their calling card. And even if they are, quote, and I use this word very loosely, quote, down by their standards, they're still pretty darn good at running the football. It's just they're not quite as overwhelming in that regard as they have been. But what have they done? Well, they've done what a great coach and a great program always does. They find something else to do with the ball, and that's then go into the air. You know, Blake Sims at quarterback has added an element that they have not needed. I'm not going to say they didn't have it, they just didn't need it in recent years, which has been the scrambler type quarterback who can make things happen on the move. They did not need that in the past. This year they more do because teams have focused so much on keeping them, you know, contained between the hashes. Well, when he gets in motion, all of a sudden now you have to be that much more concerned about using Cooper and White and their tight ends and all the things they do in the offensive system. Now, Amari Cooper, I've got to think, if I'm a pro scout, he may be my first choice out of this year's draft. The guy is that good. And he's not so much in the sense that you send him on go patterns all the time or run him on post routes, things like that. Although he can do it, don't get me wrong. He is lethal at getting that 5-yard catch and turning it into a 35-yard gain because he's so physical after the catch. He always catches in good position to keep moving. He doesn't lose momentum making those plays. You saw what he did to LSU when he absolutely had to have something happen. He did that. He's a guy that simply you can't contain one-on-one if you want to shut him down. Well, you're not going to shut him down. State knows that. They're going to have to take some chances at time and put a safety over there and shut it off and gamble that State can get enough pressure on Sims that he doesn't have time to find one of his many, many other options, including his running backs, which are quite capable receivers in their own right. But, yeah, your first obsession, obviously, has got to be Amari Cooper. He's that good. He's that dangerous. But at times, he's going to be one-on-one, and that's where Jamerson Love and Tavez Calhoun and Will Redmond are going to have to simply, you know, play the game of their lives. Otherwise, Alabama does what they want to do in offense, and you have to play catch-up, and you don't want to do that in Tuscaloosa.
Absolutely. And Alabama have only had 3 games. They really struggled on offense this year, and you've got it. The 3 games Amari Cooper was under 100 yards as those 3 games that we mentioned. Listen, we're going to appreciate so much you take some time with us, Davis. Before we go, I want to ask you one more question. And this Mississippi State-Alabama game, if there's one thing Mississippi State has to do to win this ball game, what do you think it is?
I like to list the obvious things like don't let Cooper run wild or, you know, keep the turnovers down to a minimum. And State's had a few turnover issues lately. In fact, Prescott has made a couple of reads he wishes he had back. He's also, you know, he's been a little bit slowed by that left ankle. He should be fine this weekend because he wasn't put under a lot of pressure last weekend. But he's got to get back to that play he had in the LSU, A&M, Arkansas games, Auburn games, where he wasn't making mistakes, where he was a little bit more decisive in making calls on, okay, do I keep or do I throw at this point? He's been waiting for the great big play to develop. That's probably not going to happen this weekend, so he's got to go more back to the take what's there instead of going for a 15-yard play, take that 3 or 4 yards and give yourself a better situation on 2nd, 3rd, and even 4th down, because that brings up the other factor I've harped on all season, maybe to the point of boredom. We still don't know what Mississippi State would do if they were 30 yards away from the goal line, 25 yards away from the goal line in a 4th down situation. You just don't know if they're confident in kicking for 3 points. Alabama knows that too, and it allows them to play defense a little bit differently in those things. And so what does State do? I think that's what may end up settling it. I don't see a high-scoring game this weekend, and in games like that, That's where a place kicker like Devin Sobieski's got to come out and show he's ready for prime time on this. He's made his field goals lately, but they've all been short. His longest has been 37 yards. So what do you do at this point? We may find that on Saturday, and, it's something as simple as thinking you can or can't make a field goal may be what decides this year's Southeastern Conference Western Division race.
Absolutely. I do about 1,000 interviews a year, and David Murray does as good a job breaking down the X's and O's of the game of anybody out there. You can go to dogsbite.com. Also follow them on @ScoutMSState, @ScoutMSState. David, it has been so awesome to have you on again, and hope to get you on again soon.
Enjoy talking to you.
Thanks.